Hello, good evening. Um, I'm Katrina Messenger, and welcome to my Dark Moon message. New moon, dark moon, welcome. I've been thinking a lot lately about the topic of discussion, mostly in the national sphere, not so much in the international sphere, at least not right now. Um, I've been thinking about the issues that all the conservatives are having with the southern border, our southern border, that they don't mention with our northern border or either of our coast. Um, so that the specific language that is used around the folks coming up from the South America and Central America, what we would call Latin America, it's troubling because the language that we've heard before, in my training as an archetypal pattern analyst, one of the things we do is we look for the presence of archetypal symbols um, within the cultural milieu in literature and film, um, and structure and in processes and psychologies and any cultural artifact or laws. Um, And what I'm noticing is the use of specific terminology that's being used for the human beings who are seeking to escape all kinds of deplorable conditions where they live um, and move to an area where they hope to find more potential, not only in terms of income, but also opportunity for their children and their families. They're looking to better themselves and their way of life. Um, these are all laudable um, goals. And immigrants to the US have historically brought so much with them. Um, those who came of their own accord have been able to find a way to make a way, um, which is a little bit different than, say, those of us who were already here and were massacred and isolated and pushed into remote places, or those who were stolen from their home continent and brought here as slaves. Those who came willingly as immigrants have always found a way to contribute overall to the productivity and the well-being of the country in a real way. Not to say that, those of us of the African diaspora and those of us who are descendants of the first peoples haven't also contributed. We have. But aside from us, every wave of immigrants is what has made the US the diverse uh, powerhouse that it is today. And so I wonder, why are we using the language of invasion? I often do cultural analysis, so I often look at films and see what symbols or archetypes they're employing. And I've said all along that what we call other in popular culture, like film and literature, often describes the populations of the folks who are the most marginalized. It's a way of marginalizing us further. But the language that is used for immigrants is not just the language of invasion. It's the same language and attitude that in film and in culture that we attribute to invading zombies, for example, or the undead. You know, they just keep coming and coming. Oh my goodness, what can we do? We can't stop them. It's the same symbolism that we use for the epidemic. You know, the numbers just keep rising. What can we do to stop this illness? It's the same language that was used against African Americans when we tried to move into what was then segregated communities. They just keep coming and coming. How do we keep them out? And it unnerves me. Whereas for the language for African Americans, the the fears that were highlighted was of the vulnerability of white women. You know, they'll rape our women. Whereas for the current surge at the border, they're using trafficking and drugs as the reason why these people somehow should not be accepted into our country. And the moving of the migrants from the border areas up to the what they call sanctuary cities are is kind of interesting too. It's not like when we have large numbers of refugees, specifically white refugees, where we find places where there's room for them. We are sending them as a country to the places where we're already strapped because we have so much of our spaces in the cities where we're struggling to take care of people who've been displaced and um, and are suffering due to historical segregation, uh, oppression, police violence, uh, and environmental dumping. We're sending them to the very places where they're already struggling to take care of the diversity and the numbers of people who need help are at high levels. And so instead of finding a place that has room, of which there are a lot of small towns and rural areas that are losing people, they're sending them to the very cash strapped and resource strapped cities that are already struggling. So the intent is not to help the migrants, nor to help those cities, but the intent is to make us pay for our humanity, our willingness to work together, our willingness to help each other. It's like they want us to be as fatigued with compassion as they are. It's a very sad tale that we treat human beings, other of our own species, as if they are an invading illness, as if they're proliferation like cancer or invasion like COVID. The people who are striving north from South America and Central America, Latin America, are not a virus or a cancer. They're not mindless hordes. They're not seeking to take our children or set up places where our communities can be saturated with drugs. Our children are already in danger, and our cities are already saturated with drugs. It's not these people who will bring that about or have anything to do with that. These are the same people, the same kinds of people which came here from the Eastern, from the Western Europe, escaping the poverty and the religious intolerance and the stratification of society that Europeans fled from. They're the same types of people who came from Asia and the willing migrants from the Arab world, the Middle East, and the African world. They're the same kinds of people who are seeking a new opportunity, crossed over the great Atlantic in the Mayflower, you know. They're not coming in as slaves. They're not doing a middle passage. They are walking long distances through treacherous areas because they're seeking freedom, like the former slaves marched and walked and used the Underground Railroad to escape deplorable conditions. These are people seeking the very thing we claim is so wonderful and unique about this country. They are not a scourge. I think this country is headed in a very, very dangerous direction. They're already talking about how to restrict women from the commons through the use of abortion restrictions. They're already rewriting history, claiming it's doing something about critical race theory, which they don't even know what it is they're talking about. As I understand it, critical race theory has only been taught in one school in the entire US, and that's Harvard. There is a bitterness in the air. Just as we need to find our way through the morass to handle climate change, to handle the scarcity of clean water, just as we have all these things that we need to deal with that are crucial for life on this planet, for us to stop the influx of carbon from burning all of the ancient forests, just as we're dealing with the melting of the polar ice uh, flows and permafrost. This is not a time. This is not a time to separate ourselves from humanity. This is not a time to label people and push them aside. This is not a time to try to wall up our borders to keep people away. I'd like to think that the very people that these isolationists are, quote, protecting us from are the very people who could help us solve these problems. And their voices, their experience, their energy, their willingness to do the hard work is what's going to help us get back on track to what is needed to move forward into the future we all are looking forward to. It'd be a damn shame if the very people who know how to solve the problems of the world are stopped at the border, turned back into dangerous and unhealthy areas, just as we need them. It'd be a damn shame. Careful, people in power, those who control language and the story. You're putting us in a very difficult place for what is coming in the world. Don't shoot the messenger. Just my thoughts. Take care and have a good night.